From 1992 to 1995, a brutal war raged in the small Balkan nation of Bosnia and Herzegovina. It is estimated that at least 10,000 people were killed and more than 2 million displaced. The guns were silenced with the implementation of the UN-sponsored Dayton Agreement, a provisional peace treaty making Bosnia a semi-protectorate of the United Nations with state authority exercised by a UN High Commissioner. Despite the apparent peace, beneath the surface a more profound conflict still rages, one which will determine the future soul of this country. Bosnia and Herzegovina today is divided between three ethnic groups: Bosnians, Serbs, and Croats. Although on paper equally considered, in reality, frustration drives dangerous centrifugal forces threatening the future. Muslim Bosnians are increasingly oriented towards Turkey and the Islamic world. The majority Orthodox Serbs subject to influence from Russia, while the Catholic Croats, the smallest of the ethnic groups, lean towards Europe. Heavily destroyed during the war, the Croatian villages in central Bosnia today still stand empty. In the parish of Brakovic, near the city of Travnik, of the 5,600 parishioners who were driven out, only a few hundred have returned, the majority of which are elderly. The school, which in the years before the war admitted 700 students, now has only 9 children distributed in 4 classes. Pre-war neighbors, Muslims and Catholics, communicate only insofar as they have to. According to unofficial data of the Catholic Church, in the 4 dioceses of Bosnia and Herzegovina, only 380,000 Catholics remain. When war first escalated in 1992, the Croat Catholic and Bosnian Muslims became allies against the greater Serbian aggression. The alliance, however, was short-lived. The inflow of Muslim refugees and numerous violations between the communities in the spring of 1993 broke the agreement, and warfare flared up between the Bosnian Muslims and Croat Catholics. The Croat majority in central Bosnia, practically unarmed and without strategic support, suddenly found themselves completely surrounded by the significantly stronger Bosnian army. Zvonimir Ćirić was a war correspondent for the Croatian media at the time.
Nije bilo mjesta u Lašvanskoj dolini gdje je mogao čovjek stati, naravno ne računajući podrum.
There was no place in the Lashva Valley where a man could go and a Bosnian sniper couldn't get him. No distance offered adequate protection. If they couldn't get you from the south, they got you from the north. And that's the way it was for 316 days. My own small town of Vitez had 653 killed. Percentually, after Vukovar, it was the worst hit. 653 victims from Vitez alone. Can you even imagine what sort of a tragedy that was? In Vitez, over 600 children were left without one or both parents. 460 widows. All of that took place in those 316 days.
With the escalation of violence between Muslims and Catholics, Mujahideen mercenaries, foreign guerrilla fighters from the Gulf states, entered the war importing a radical Islamic ideology into Bosnia-Herzegovina. The Franciscan monastery of St. Francis in Guča Gora, located 9 kilometers from the city of Travnik, remains for the locals a symbol of the survival of the Catholic faith in central Bosnia. Throughout its 150-year history, these stones have silently witnessed repeated violence and tragedy. Having survived efforts by the communists to destroy the community during the Second World War, in 1993, the Mujahideen mercenaries and Bosnian army, after driving out 3,000 parishioners from Guča Gora, showed no mercy toward the Franciscan church and monastery. Father Velimir Vajan, professor of Franciscan theology in Sarajevo, speaks to the hate-inspired vandalism.
When we went into exile, we brought a lot of the artwork with us, so we were able to save a lot of it. But we couldn't take this fresco or the mosaic with us. And when we came back, the mosaic was damaged. The Bosnian army, or more likely the Mujahideen, the Arab mercenaries, dug out the eyes of Jesus and of Our Lady. The image itself is Our Lady of Sorrows.
The brutality of the Mujahideen is evidenced by the damage to the statue of Saint Francis, the patron of the monastery. The bullet marks on the bronze body witness to the hatred of the aggressors. After the Bosnian army drove Father Frajo Krizanac from the monastery, he spent a year living in Zenica, some 20 kilometers away. A shock awaited him upon his return to Guča Gora.
Only the walls were left standing. There was nothing left on the wall, and nothing left between the walls. No furniture. When I came, there was nothing to lie on, nothing to sit on. 3 days before I moved in, the library was still there. But when I came, it was gone. It had been carried away. The organ was completely destroyed. In the church itself, they had completely destroyed everything. They had thrown oil paint over the fresco, sullied the altar, and used the church as a football pitch. All types of things had taken place there.
As the church leaders returned with the ceasefire imposed by the Dayton Agreement, so too, despite the fears for their own security, the first Croats started to come back to their homes. For many Travnik Catholics, the joy and celebration of peace was short-lived. Those who returned to their villages seeking to pick up the remains of livelihoods were cut down in terrorist attacks by roaming extremist Islamic groups. Don Željko Marić, director of the Catholic School Center Petar Barbarić in Travnik, recalls the tragic events.
Here in Travnik, we shouldn't forget the true process of returning was blocked in many ways by the society. 7 people out of our community were killed in their places of work in 1997, 1998, and afterwards, with the intent of stopping those who were driven out from ever returning.
To date, none of those who committed terrorist attacks against the Travnik Catholic returnees have been brought to justice, perpetuating a sense of insecurity and distrust in the rule of law.
There is no political will to examine these murders. This is still going on. It's clear that they are in no hurry. They cannot drive us out in any other way, so they count on dragging this out. This will be unbearable for the Croats. And see, unfortunately, we are leaving.